Hey, Alex. Alex, is your microphone on? Hey, Alex, can you hear me? Anyway, I'm not able to join for another 30 or 40 minutes, okay? So I'm going to make you host for now. Is that okay? Okay, thanks, Alex.
I didn't hear him respond. Jeez, is that just helios?
Okay, Alex, you are now host. I'm going to drop off. I'll join again in about 30, 40 minutes, okay? Sorry about that.
Test audio, testing microphone, test 1, 2.
Yeah, I can hear you now, Alex. Okay, so I'm dropping off. I'll rejoin later, okay? Thanks.
Just the two of us, eh?
Nice weather. Knock, knock.
Are we on the right channel, young man?
Yeah, knock, knock. Yeah, yeah.
Yes, I'm waiting for other people.
I can't hear you. Try again.
Testing.
That's better.
I'm just getting I'm just getting a message type in for the chat session. GCC barn raising.
Are you the host today?
Looks like it, yeah.
Good.
I'll see if I got any power.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
Host. Recording to the cloud.
It's very mumbled, Alex. What's the administrator password?
Don't know. Siri, what's the administrator password? Put it on the PC. Guess what I found. How to find. Administrator admin password is the password to any account that has administrator level access. It's newer versions of Windows like Windows 10, 8 and 7. Most primary accounts can be configured to be administrator accounts, so an administrator password is most often the password to your account. Not all user accounts are set up this way. Many special fields of Windows on new computers are. The administrator password is to the user. It needs power, doesn't it? Do I plug it in there?
No, it is.
It's not on charge. On it.
Vaya.
Mm.
Como me la escuchaba.
Which one?
El message. Ah, pues va.
What message?
Kung nag-uwat ka,
Okay, then Microsoft account. Mom wants you. And you're gone. Oh my God.
Hello, Heiner, you coming from Madrid?
Hello, host. How are you?
He hasn't got a microphone working.
I'm just.
Well, he's got the host button by the look of things.
I'm just having a break, and I'm sitting here with Jörg Altekruse, but we cannot join. We just wanted to make sure that we might meet in 24 hours when we are a little bit more relaxed, heading after a little laundry day tomorrow towards the last week of the COP24. Tell the people we'll do this typical DAC meeting, like updating you on Youth for Future and the COP and Heiner. So please take care and excuse me. Excuse me all. Good night and good luck.
F1 system recovery, F2 system diagnostics, F9 boot device options. हाँ जी
मरना कहाँ जी
सीधी साफ गल करदा हूं ओके जेदे नाल गल करदा जेड़ा सवाल उत्थे दिता सी उत्थे मैनूं जवाब चाहिदा तुसीं इधर उधर करदे ना गल फिर टाइम बहुत लगदा मैं मेरी पूछने को विचों विच बात चलदी आ पासवर्ड हैगा कि नहीं कुछ
नहीं
ऐसा मतलब नहीं ठीक है ना सीधा साफ जवाब ठीक है मत्थे ते मारो सट लगे पता लगे आप भैन जी करन लग पैंदे फिर आप सिखां नूं बैठे ही रहना मैनूं कोई गलत ना समझे या मैनूं कोई बुरा ना समझे समझ एक दूजे नूं आप सारे ही बुरा आ फिर सच्ची सच्चाई ते आओ ना सब नाल उच्ची सच्चाई आ वो तो उच्ची है बोलना ते रहना सच्चाई दे विच ते मैं नहीं क्या मैं भी झूठा ही सीगा boot device options F9 okay F9 7, 8, 9. Did you see the menu that came up before?
F1.
No, I'll start again so that you can see what happens. What we'll do, take that out to there. Press F10 to BIOS setup options, escape to exit. Escape, and it should go try and start up now. Okay, so click on that, go down there, restart. You have to pay attention to the screen, nowhere else. No, I'm deadly serious. If you don't want to learn, that's fine. (2007), enter, press and keep pressing escape. If you miss it, then you have to go through the whole thing again. I think we missed it because I was telling you to pay attention. You could probably look at YouTube and ask YouTube how to start reconfiguration. It's not doing anything now. I'm dead. That's me not paying attention. Shut down. Press start. Start pressing escape straight away. No. Okay, a menu comes up.
Yeah.
So this menu, you can bring up this menu on any device, but the button you press to bring up this menu is different. Sometimes it's F2, sometimes it's F10, or F8 or delete or a combination. But it will tell you when it boots up, if you look very carefully, either here or here or here, it tells you which buttons to press. F9.
Boot device options.
Right. So we want to put the boot device option to USB, in which case we will have something in the USB slot ready so that we can boot up from the USB slot when we press F9. Operating system boot manager, I don't know. Boot from EFI file. Notebook hard drive. To change the option, enter to select an option, F10 to BIOS, setup options, escape. F10 to BIOS, setup options. Very important. F10 will go take us into BIOS. Basic in-out system. BIOS, B-I-O-S. System configuration. Is this a USB 3 slot?
Think so.
Don't know.
Yes.
Boot options. Doesn't go straight, there's nothing here that says go straight to USB drive. No, looks like escape. Put one up. Again, customize amount of time for the user to press hotkey at post. Okay. CD-ROM boot. Enable, disable CD-ROM boot during boot time. Internal network boot, no. No, it didn't accept that. I don't know. No.
Why?
I'm busy.
Man, he's bossy.
I'm busy. I'm a busy bossy. Bossy busy.
Yeah. Okay, guys, come on. Hey, come on. We're gonna have a phone. Come on,
Door handle check no phone. You should have a CD player on.
Yeah.
अच्छे छोड़ दो मेरे को
अच्छा जी
HP तो खुद दा सिस्टम है उन्होंने कहा
When I tried to log in before, it came up with a link to a website Microsoft, which I didn't think would make much sense. It said account recovery. I tried it, but I tried it like 2-3 times. They said this is all the information I need, and it said this is not suitable. That's information. Every time, so it doesn't.
फोन ते जे मैसेज पूछा ना आपने बाबा
Message
no
Is there no way just to scrap everything?
What?
Is there no way to scrap everything and then just restart the whole thing? How? Oh. So that's gonna delete everything, isn't it?
Yes, but they have two ways of doing it. And I don't know which way it's being done. नौकरी बदल ले
हाँ जी नौकरी नहीं
पिछली बार अपनी गल हुई कहने से नौकरी बदलनी है
और उदों इंडिया तो आके फिर उदों दे इको नौकरी इको दे ही जो इंडिया गए ना इंडिया तो वो चेंज कर दी इंडिया तो
किससे काम कर रहे
और चेस्टर मां चेस्टर दे लगे
खादा काम
मशीन लेकर मशीन
अंदर बैठ के अंदर हीटर लग गया
हीटर एसी बढ़िया होगा दूर आ जब
मैनचेस्टर दूर है
मैनचेस्टर चेस्टर
चेस्टर तो मैनचेस्टर तो पहला आंदा
ना
M6 से जाके खब्बे ਨੂੰ ਮੁੜ ਕੇ ਚੈਸਟਰ ਆ ਜਾਂਦਾ
ये मैनचेस्टर 90 in chapter 20
चेस्टर कहाँ
chapter वन जंक्शन
देख ला मनु तो मैं जिससे को मनु चेता चेस्टर इधर है
नहीं जितना ये उन्हीं जंक्शन
खब्बे ਨੂੰ ਮੁੜ ਕੇ ਚੈਸਟਰ ਆਉਂਦਾ
हाँ नहीं ये 20 जंक्शन तो उतर के
अच्छा
ये जरा मां चैप्टर वा भाई को तो पैंदा भाई दूर होए पर ये 19 तो उतर जाएगा ਉਹਦਾ ਉੱਥੋਂ ਵੀ ਚੱਲ ਜਾਈਦਾ 20 ਤੋਂ 19 ਤੋਂ 18 ਤੋਂ ਜਦੋਂ ਮਾਰਕ ਕਰ ਵਿੱਚ ਵਿੱਚ ਇਹ ਮੇਨ ਆ ਦਾ ਉਹ ਆ ਇੱਕੋ ਹੀ ਇਹ ਪੈਣਾ ਕਿੰਨਾ ਖੈਰ ਜਾ ਰਿਹਾ
एक कितना दिन दे घंटे का
दिंदे आफ्टर ड्रग्स 15 पाउंड हां
18 19 पाउंड है फिर घंटे का 20 पाउंड भी हो जाना मेरे पास
और 18 19 पाउंड Yeah, good money. रेंजर नहीं होता भाई जिन्हें मर्जी ले लिए सवाल नहीं होता
कदे और
पैसे मनी आ गया वो मिल जाए
वो तो फिर वो तो बच्चे निक्के होंगे वो सुन चलदा
नहीं सारी के सारी
हां ਜੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਉਸੇ ਰਾਹ ਤੇ ਰਹਿਣਾ ਤੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਉਹੀ ਗਹਿਰੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਬੈਠੇ ਰਹਿਣਾ ਤੇ ਤੁਹਾਡੀ ਗੱਲਬਾਤ ਵੀ ਸਾਰਿਆਂ ਦੇ ਜੋ ਤੁਹਾਡੇ ਹਾਣੀ ਦੋਸਤ ਸਾਰੇ ਉਦੋਂ ਦੇ ਹੋਣੇ ਆ ਜੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਸੋਚਿਆ ਜੇ ਉਹ ਅੰਦਰੋਂ ਵਿਚਾਰ ਉੱਠਿਆ ਕਿ ਮੈਂ ਗਾਹਾਂ ਨੰਗਾ ਗਾਹਾਂ ਵੀ ਦੇਖਾ ਕੁਛ ਹੈਗਾ ਕਿ ਨਹੀਂ ਫੇਰ ਬਦਲੂਗਾ ਆ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਹੈਗੇ ਆ ਇਸ ਵੇਲੇ ਅਮੀਰ ਲੋਕ ਜਿਹੜੇ ਅਮਰੀਕਾ ਤੇ UK ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਖਾਸ ਇਹ ਦੋ ਉਸ ਗਹਿਰੇ ਚ ਫਸੇ ਆ ਉਹ ਨਹੀਂ ਚਾਹੁੰਦੇ ਕਿ ਹੋਰ ਕੋਈ ਸਾਡਾ ਕੁਛ ਵੀ ਵਿਗਾੜਨ ਜਾਂ ਕੁਛ ਵੀ ਬਦਲਣ ਅਸੀਂ ਉੱਥੇ ਹੀ ਰਹਿਣਾ ਕਿ ਸਾਡਾ ਹੁਕਮ ਚੱਲੇ ਸਾਰੇ ਪਾਸੇ
ਹੁਕਮ ਨਹੀਂ ਮਾਰਦਾ ਚਲੋ ਇਹ ਵੀ ਹੋ ਸਕਦਾ ਜਦੋਂ ਬੰਦੇ ਕੋਲ ਮਾਇਆ ਆਏਗੀ ਪਤਾ ਕਹਿੰਦਾ ਮੈਂ ਆਹ ਕਰਨਾ ਇੰਨੀ ਹੋ ਜੇ
ਹਾਂ ਫਿਰ ਕਿਸੇ ਵੇਲੇ ਤਾਂ ਸਬਰ ਆਊਗਾ ਹੀ ਉਹ ਬੱਚੇ ਹੁਣ ਮਤਾਬ ਛੋਟਾ ਬੱਚਾ 2 ਸਾਲ ਦਾ 18 20 ਸਾਲ ਹੋਰ 25 ਸਾਲ ਵੀ ਰੱਖ ਲਓ ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਜਦੋਂ 15-16 ਤੋਂ ਤੇ ਉਹ ਪਲਣ ਲੱਗ ਪਈ ਫਿਰ ਉਹਦੀ ਸੈੱਟ ਹੋ ਗਈ, ਫਿਰ ਉਹਦਾ ਧਿਆਨ ਹੋਰ ਪਾਸੇ ਨੂੰ ਹੋ ਗਿਆ, ਫਿਰ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਵੀ ਵਿਚਾਰ ਬਦਲੂਗਾ। ਪਰ ਜੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਹੋਰ ਕੋਈ ਰਾਹ ਦੇ ਵਿੱਚ ਬੈਠੇ, ਜਿੱਦਾਂ ਗੁਰਦੁਆਰੇ ਦੇ ਕਮੇਟੀ ਮੈਂਬਰ ਹੁੰਦਾ ਆ, ਉਹਨਾਂ ਦੇ 50-60 ਸਾਲ ਦੇ ਵੀ ਹੋ ਗਏ ਆ, ਬਾਕੀ ਦੀ ਸੰਗਤਾਂ ਨੂੰ ਉਹਨੇ ਉੱਥੇ ਅਨਾਉਂਸ ਕਰ ਦੇਣਾ ਲੰਗਰ ਛਕ ਕੇ ਜਾਇਓ, ਤੇ ਉਦਾਂ ਥੱਲੇ ਜਾ ਕੇ ਆਪ ਖਿਸਕ ਜਾਣਾ ਕਿ ਅਸੀਂ ਚਲੋ ਆਪਾਂ ਅੱਜ ਕੀ ਖਾਣਾ, ਅੱਜ ਚਿਕਨ ਖਾਣੀ ਹੈ ਕਿ ਫਿਸ਼ ਖਾਣੀ ਹੈ, ਕਿੱਥੇ ਚੱਲੀਏ ਖਾਣਾ ਖਾਣ। ਉਹ ਫਿਰ ਉੱਥੇ ਫਸੇ ਆ, ਫਿਰ ਉੱਥੋਂ ਨਿਕਲਣਾ ਫਿਰ ਬਹੁਤ ਔਖਾ ਹੋ ਜਾਂਦਾ। ਹਰੇਕ ਚੀਜ਼ ਦੀ ਕੀਮਤ ਹੈ, ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕੀ ਛੱਡਣ ਨੂੰ ਤਿਆਰ ਆ, ਕੀ ਛੱਡੋਗੇ। ਜੇ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕੁਛ ਨਹੀਂ ਛੱਡਣਾ ਤੇ ਤੁਹਾਡਾ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕੁਛ ਬਦਲ ਨਹੀਂ ਸਕਦੇ। ਇੱਥੇ ਵਿੰਡੋਜ਼ 10 ਕਿਹੜੀ ਸੀਗੀ ਅੱਗੇ? ਵਿੰਡੋਜ਼ 8 ਸੀਗੀ ਇੱਥੇ ਨੇ, ਵਿੰਡੋਜ਼ 10 ਚਾੜ ਦਿੰਦੇ ਆ। बाबे ने नहीं मारना, बाबे का नाम नहीं लेना है, सही बोलना सीखो।
ठीक है पापा, पर बाबे की जुबान बड़ी पक्की पापा।
थोड़े थोड़े थोड़ी जुबान बड़ी पक्की है।
ठीक है पापा।
Papa, can I have the TV remote? Can I have the TV remote? I want
The
it.
door's open. Close the door properly.
He's not even letting me get
Just
out.
knock on the door. Open the door. Get up!
No.
Close the door.
Jaswinder, if Sam's not back yet, so I'm going to bed.
Yeah. Yeah. What's the matter?
I don't forgive you and loving me to me. I don't mean to know.
How can she tell which potting you when you're sitting here? Yeah.
I'd rather turn the lights on. No lights in the room.
Don't come in here. I'm not in here. Don't come in here.
Something's happened to the lights.
Yeah.
Hey, Bob. I'm mommy.
Your mommy. No, no, don't do that. I'll smack you.
Whatever. I can run away.
Bye.
I'm in the dark. Let me put the light on.
Jaswinder,
Yeah.
sorry I'm late.
Well,
Very late.
I didn't know you were going to be late, so it makes no difference really.
Was Alex on earlier?
Yeah. He
Was-
left about 10 minutes ago.
Yeah, well, are we still recording? Oh, we are still recording. Anyway, for the record, had to help someone with a constipation problem.
Constipation. How nice. So I assume they're sitting on the toilet now and doing their business.
Everything came out. It came out in the end.
Good. Glad to hear that.
So, you know, I did notice, Jaswinder, you were gone for 3 or 4 weeks.
As I said about 8 weeks ago, there's a new baby in the house.
Ah,
And this baby has upset everybody's timetable and set patterns. And today is the birthday of the 2-year-old, so we're having a birthday party as well. And the little one is now 8 weeks old. And it's just starting to settle down a little bit.
so are all the little ones sisters or are they cousins?
Sisters.
Well, congratulations. I assume you're the grandfather?
Yeah. Thank you.
Congratulations. How do you feel about leaving the earth in its current condition to your progeny?
How do I feel about leaving the earth?
In its current state to your children and grandkids?
That's a very loaded question, really. I'm not giving you any flip answers, but these are the answers of the reality. It doesn't really matter whether they're grandchildren, mine, yours, or anybody's, but they are the ones who are going to have to deal with the mismanagement of the previous generations. Now, you and I are fortunate in that we are multicultural. And when I look at the white Anglo-Saxon Protestant people, the WASPs, I see some very deep, ingrained habits that they have acquired, some from the Bible and others because the Bible gave them permission to be that way. And everywhere I look, I see signs of white supremacy. And they've hidden it very well up until recently. So this particular phase of the human psychic development, the software, if you like, was prophesied long time ago, and especially 2,000 years ago to the Westerners, that this would happen. And in that it was written down as Judgment Day. So whether you wait for Jesus to come back and do the judgment or accept that it's happening now, in either case, it is happening. It's surprisingly good that after World War II, when the United Kingdom brought about the Act of Parliament to, I'm sorry, the laptop's trying to talk to me. How do I mute my PC? Okay, I'll mute the PC.
Somebody's calling you?
Yeah. I've got a PC over there that's suddenly decided to come to life and talk with me. As long as the people were not educated, the majority of the people, so we're looking at over 75% of the population ever not to be educated, it would have been fine. Except that countries, especially the United Kingdom and most of Europe, most of the population, their youngsters were decimated, and they were desperate to get to some sort of normality or normalcy, as they say in the USA. And they decided that everybody ought to have an education, albeit a bare minimum, to be able to read, write, measure, and talk accurately, which was what happened was when uneducated people went into the factories, they just stood there. They didn't know what to do. And everything had to be explained. There was no cross-transference of any skills. Housewives did the washing by hand, they did the cooking by hand, everything was by hand. And all of a sudden they were put into the world of semi-automation, and they didn't know how to do anything. 1944, for argument's sake, 1945 to 2015, 70 years. And here we are 4 years later, and we're in the thick of it. 70 years ago, 4 or 5 years ago, I began to notice that the level of intelligence being displayed, and people were beginning to question the systems that were imposed on them, and the whole dialogue of how we talk with each other was changing at a tremendous rate. So if you look at movies that go back 80, 90 years, just after the silent era, the 20s, 30s onwards, and we compare the dialogue of those movies with the dialogue of the movies 5 years ago, say, the same movies that were made, Ben-Hur, etc., even Shakespeare, the attitude and the way the actors behave, post-war movies to present-day movies. And it was inevitable that the ruling classes would be questioned sooner or later. I, speaking quite honestly, did not expect it so soon. Although 5 years ago, I was making the noises, I'm looking for signs of intelligence. and they've slapped me in the face like everybody else. We are not aware of this. We're not aware of the changes that have come about internally to us. And we're still bickering over little things, the them and us situation. And we're not aware that it was bound to happen, that somebody who understood the power of memes, of repeating something constantly like a child, hello Josh, would be able to become a president or a prime minister or something, because the level of the majority of the people, just above the majority, the 50–60%, their dialogue is still at that stage, you know, the baby boomers from the 50s and the 60s. Now, fortunately, a lot of them have died off in the last 4 or 5 years, and that may make the difference. And we will know on the 12th of December. And the younger generation, the 18–20-year-olds, well, they're way ahead of the 20-year-olds of my generation, as we have seen. So I have no regrets. I think that the people who are going to be taken over from us have the tools and the software to do it very well and at a tremendous speed. And the tools that they require, the hardware and the software, they're ready. We've spent umpteen wars making sure that the machines that we produce are reliable. We've bet our lives on it. We've bet our countries on it. That if we don't defeat you, you get to take over our country. Those were the testing periods. We can move toward a peaceful way of generating a living from planet Earth, and now we can start making machines which will last for as long as needed before we recycle them. The whole consumerism is the start of the end of consumerism, capitalism. All yours.
Can I ask you one question? You mentioned the prophecy, and you said that all of this was prophesied. If so, what is the next thing that's prophesied?
We have internal and external dangers, of which there is no, well, there is a prophecy that one of those terrorist dangers, well, it'll be annihilated. That has been prophesied as well. Whether we try to stop that or not, or what we do about it, or whether it's assimilated, whatever happens, and I'm hoping that it'll be assimilated rather than outright just bombed to pieces, that has been prophesied as well. And we will move forward. Whether we will explore beyond our solar system in the near future, again, that's an open field, but we are moving in that direction.
What are you talking about? What prophecy are you referring to?
Well, you want me to be more exact?
I was curious. Is it Nostradamus? Is it someone else?
It was a Guru Gobind, a great prophesier from the East this time. See, that's one of the other mistakes we keep making, is that we do not keep up with the latest prophecies, because they are not directed at a particular culture, or it's somebody else's culture. It's nothing to do with me, because I've already got mine, and we're not expecting an update, but they are being updated. So whether that's mine or not, I should look at the others as well, see what's running in that, which I did. And I've had a heck of a time since I've been on social chatting platforms to try and convince anybody that you know, these things are up and running. We are machines. We have software. And this software, although we're self-learning, changes and it sticks. So if we're not careful, we're our own annihilators. But hopefully, whether it's this December or in a couple of years' time, the tide is turning. Of that, I'm sure now. Hello, Josh. We're just having a little tete-a-tete. Sam hasn't been back long.
Josh, were you on earlier or did you just join now?
I've been on for a little while. I just turned on the video just recently.
I can't hear you, Josh.
Can you hear me now?
Well, my volume's on 85 and I can't hear you.
How about now?
Much better, thank you.
Yeah, I've been on for a little while, just listening to the prophecies, and I really enjoyed listening to Jaswinder's view, so I'm just listening.
Well, this is the sort of thing I was trying to put forward a couple of days ago and last week with our Dougie, but he doesn't. I'm beginning to suspect that he has slight amnesia because he very rarely brings up anything from the past that we've talked about. Have you noticed that? Yeah.
I have. I think that's a choice. I don't think he has amnesia at all. He's quite good at recalling. I just think that he chooses to try to stay in the present. That's more of been the vibe I get. That's my perception. I don't know about you, Sam.
Well, this Thursday, he kept repeating what he's been repeating for the past 2 years, and that is the ethos of my truth and your truth, and we all have different truths. And he will not move forward to absolute conclusion that there has to be an ultimate truth. And the other thing that I was trying to move away from this Thursday was that this love thing, that all we need is love. And I did ask the question again at the end of the session on Thursday, is there a higher attribute than love?
I was going to say, Jaswinder, I got a pretty good memory, and we've touched that subject of love many, many times. I can't remember the exact amount, but somewhere I would roughly say, at least from the amount of sessions I've been on with everyone, 17 to 23 times. We've gone deep into what is love and is there a different attribute and how do we define it? So that's definitely been discussed before, a higher attribute than love. I don't know if you remember those conversations. Are you still there, Sam? I think Jaswinder went in and out. I think your mic is muted.
Sorry, I was just saying, I'm saying goodbye to a guest, so I'll be back in a few minutes, okay?
Okay. And Jaswinder, I think your mic is muted. You went in and out, if you can hear me, if you're getting the audio.
Yeah, I dropped out, the router dropped out, I don't know why. Anyway, I've logged on to the same router, but different configuration. Talking about love, so do you remember that we've discussed this before? Is that what you were saying?
I do.
Right.
Yeah, I do remember a couple times discussing a higher attribute of love.
Which is truth.
That definitely came up, for sure. Truth.
And it's never been, and the only person to repeat that is me. And everybody else keeps falling back to the fail-safe position, which is just keep being nice to each other and being kind to each other, and that's all we need.
They're trying to love each other. I think that's pretty basic and simple. That I mean, for me at least, traveling around the world and meeting a lot of people, that word love gets used almost to the point where it loses its power, because it is a powerful word, especially if you say to someone, I love you. That's very powerful.
Let's take let's take the situation of a man and a wife who love each other, and they've got married and they're raising children, and that's fine. Now, one of the things that they have agreed upon is the honesty of their situation, of their vows, and that should they do something which is not quite right, and they would tell the other partner. So if one of them decides to have an affair and hides it, how long do you think that relationship would last?
Oh, I thought that was a rhetorical question. I didn't know if you were waiting for an answer.
No, not rhetorical, because it happens so many times these days.
I had this exact conversation when I was 19 years old at a Taco Bell with my supervisor at work. And he sat me and my little friend down, because we were young kids at the time. And he explained to us, if you have an affair and you're in a committed relationship, no matter what, the universe will conspire to make sure that she knows.
The thing of it
I got that lesson.
The thing of it is that the person who has the affair, whether they're aware of not at the time, it changes their behavior.
Correct.
And the other partner starts picking up on that. And especially women, because don't forget, they are pre-programmed to look at behavior in their children, and to them, we're no different. And that's what happens. So unless we are honest, we're not going to get anywhere. And that is the state of the world today, is that we're going around loving each other, and at the same time, we're screwing everybody over by saying, but I love you, I want to be nice with you, and I want all your money.
I agree. There's a lot of, that is also prophesized, the false prophet of the false statements of professing love and not following through on the sacred divinity that is the bond of love itself.
Right. So we have the United States of America that has happiness enshrined in its, what do you call that? The United States, the Constitution, yeah. Okay. And then we have the Christian religion that says love each other, but it also says be honest. And then we have other religions that are trying out different kind of scenarios. So when I looked at it, there were the 6 main ones operate more or less similar, but they have slightly different constraints as to how to move forward. What is the best way of conducting ourselves with each other from the individual to the country level? And we're not doing it. The happiness thing, work hard and you make some money and you will be happy, doesn't work. Love each other, be kind to each other, and all you need is love, that doesn't work. And the honesty bit, we put that on the back burner. Yeah, we'll give that some thought later. We don't need it right now because we're busy hoarding all the money, and I want to buy a private island, and then I will need a yacht to go from the mainland to the island and all that. And the world is going to rack and ruin because we are stuck with what we took on board, and we're not looking outwardly, we're looking inwardly. And by that, I will throw the accusation at the white Anglo-Saxon Protestants. They are the main culprits.
Well, they're the ones that, yeah, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, just being an American and growing up in this country and getting indoctrinated into the experiment or the lie or whatever you want to call this country that decided to break off, because with all tribes and all nations of the world, at some point they break off and separate. Like, for example, India had its revolution with its governance of the country of Great Britain in the 1800s, and it had already broken off, it had a rich history that went back thousands of years, so it had experienced a lot of things. The country of America was around for about 100,000 years. There was just something in the newspaper saying they found evidence of human beings living in San Diego, California, because they're building a freeway. And more archaeology is just coming out saying, you know, it's not a 20,000 year history, it's probably 100,000 year history. So there was a lot of breaking off, separating, figuring out who goes where, different tribes in the Northeast, others in the West, blah, blah, blah. America had a rich history, but the white Anglo-Saxon Protestants who decided to separate from Great Britain and come and create something over here, that experiment, you know, it's brand new. It's only 4 people ago, 400 years. It's just a brand new thing. And I grew up here from 1973 is when I was born till now. And I've seen history get rewritten several times in just my 46 years here on Earth. And the idea that you're saying, like, people say that they love America, that's so full of shit. They don't love America because America isn't the lie that they've been told. So in other words, the stories have to play out. You've got to wait for these prophecies to happen. There was a Hopi prophecy from the Native Americans knowing this time would come. And I'm sure there was a lot of prophecies from other tribes in Americas. And nobody saw America being more than a few colonies on the East Coast. The fact that just recently, in the early part of the 19th century, they're still forming America. I mean, it's still, how can I say this? The white Anglo-Saxon Protestants have been in power for a long time here in this country, and they're just now starting to lose their grip of the power.
Yep.
Just the last 50 years.
Yep. And they don't want to.
But of course not. Who does? In every country, like the people, what was it, the French that took over Haiti, what they did to that country, I mean, they have a rich history. It's the way I look at it is the biggest thing that changed in the last few thousand years was the industrial revolution, the steam engine. The engine itself was the biggest change ever. And the next biggest change to come onto the scene happened in the last 50 years is interconnecting light through digital fiber optic cables, and, you know, the connection of all the people. Like Heiner's just popped in from Germany. That's a huge, I'm assuming you're at your home, Heiner. I think he froze for a second. But that's a huge change to have Heiner just pop in from Germany. Here you are in England, Sam's in Seattle. I'm on a satellite, like literally. I think this is a huge change for me to be on this thing. That's how I'm connecting with you, through the sky up into space. And that's very recent.
Okay, let me briefly talk. No, let me
please, Heiner, go ahead.
Let me briefly talk, because I just bumped into my
think you're freezing. Your connection is freezing. I think he'll be back in a second, Jaswinder, if you can hear me. But all I can say is nobody saw the interconnecting of all the airplanes up in the sky happening with everyone in the world being able to travel through the air. And nobody saw these digital lines that we're communicating on. Like none of these prophecies saw any of those things. Or maybe some did. I don't know. I don't know all the prophecies in the world, but
there aren't many. There aren't many deep ones. We've been going through them at the rate of knots. It was prophesied that the country would fight with country, and the next stage is that the countries after fighting, it's like the playground at the school. After you had a fight with somebody, you tend to make friends, or you form little groups into big groups, and that's what we're doing. And then there's a slight difference in that the group wants to splinter off a little bit. One says, well, I want to leave you and join another group, which is fine. So all this is the promulgation of the software and the settling down and of the loyalties. But unless we start being honest with each other and honest with our fellow beings and our fellow countries, and we're not going to be able to get over this. I'll rephrase that. We will get over the present situation of climate change. That was bound to happen. That's a Petri dish experiment that most 12th graders do at school. You know, you put a culture in a Petri dish and then put it in the incubator and see what happens. That eventually it'll produce enough poison out of its own wastage to kill itself, unless it has a chance to recycle those the wastage. So we are at that stage. Our own wastage and our own overflow of what we don't need is starting to engulf us. That we have not prepared for. Now, I will go back to one stage back to a couple of 100 years ago when the Industrial Revolution was at its height in the 1750s to the 1850s or so, and the early 1900s. Had those that started the Industrial Revolution shared it with the other countries, all the other countries would be now at the same level as the G8, G9, or even the G20 countries, and we'd all be much better at tackling the problem than we currently are. Which now means, what do we do now? Do the rich countries start tackling the problem while they're waiting for the poor countries to catch up? Or do they play catch up and then do it? Or the two together? So that's a promulgation that will happen anyway as well. It's just a little more time consuming. And out of that, we will start to join together. Nice to see you again, Sam. So that's not been prophesied as far as I'm aware, but we are the ones now who are doing the prophesying and the doing. All yours, Josh, complete.
Totally agree with that understanding. I'm going to pause for a second and let the kids speak for a second. Okay. Tell me if you can hear me with the, I know the kids are loud over there. I don't know if you're following the conversation, Sam, but give me a second to collect my thoughts again.
I apologize. I was dealing with the puppies and making myself coffee.
Oh, no problem, Sam. I understand. I'm just waiting for Jaswinder to come back because we were in the middle of a very good
the little one's birth and they're all excited and they've just pulled
no, that's okay.
The crackers,
I think that's
it's full of confetti, the big long things, streamers.
I think that exact moment that just happened where the kids get excited is a good microcosm for as above, also below. So just like Jaswinder and I are having a good conversation, the kids get excited, and there is a stop in the moment.
Sorry about that. Who was the one with the constipation problem? One of your children?
Wait, Jaswinder, are you not hearing Joshua? Joshua was speaking.
I'm not sure if he can hear me.
You know, I also had to max out my speakers in order to hear you, Josh.
Yeah, I don't know. I can log in, log out if I'm unmatched
right
or
now,
something.
you're coming through very clear. Right now, you're very clear. Okay. Jaswinder, can you nod if you can hear Joshua?
I can hear Joshua fairly well now.
Okay, so he was talking, he was reflecting about the conversation with him. I was apologizing for making coffee and dealing with the puppies. Joshua was collecting his thoughts again in order to respond to you.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just trying to stay present in the moment that we have conversations with each other, just like nations have conversations with each other. And then something gets excited and the conversation drops out for a few hundred years or a couple decades and then comes back. So I'm saying this exact moment is much like a microcosm of the whole world. And we are all representatives of nation states, if you will, of our own sovereign being of reality. And it takes a second to collect and reconnect the conversations with each other. And sometimes that little hiccup can be 100 years. It can be 50 years. It can be 2,000 years for certain tribal nation states. And I think the real wisdom of humanity is to realize that time moves in cycles beyond lifetimes. So it's up to the next generations to continue those conversations. And thus, the few people left on Earth that have been having a conversation for 100,000 years, meaning the tribal native people that didn't write things down but passed it on through oral traditions, certain tribes in Africa, in South America, Native Americans, New Zealanders, et cetera, the people that have been keeping the knowledge for thousands of years and passing it on orally are not affected by the disruptions in the conversation, like the burning of the library in Alexandria. And they're not disrupted by the conversations like a few white people who profess to be Christian splitting off and going over the ocean and starting little colonies in the Americas. So there are conversations that's been happening for hundreds of thousands of years, and we as tribes get to tune into those conversations and listen. I think that's our job as humanity, is to listen to the longer conversations. Just like we're having a 2-hour conversation, most people have a 2-minute conversation or a 20-second conversation. That's the goal of humanity, is to listen to the longer form conversations, realize that there's many, many stories, meaning religious or other doctrines and dogmas, and weave them together like beads on one string. And that was the prophecy I was told when I was a kid, is that we have major wars like World War I, World War II, and we can have another major war if we need to, or we can listen to each other and create a new humanity and actually dispel these different religions of being separate and unite them all together like beads on a string. The Zoroastrians, the Buddhists, the Taoists, the Shinto, on and so forth, the Muslim, the Sikhs, etc., this kind of Christian, that kind of Christian, and listen to the long form of these conversations to realize that there is a union and a weaving of those conversations together. So that's the experiment of the petri dish you talk about, Jaswinder, for climate change and for bacteria eating itself and, polluting its own petri dish. But the petri dish that is reality is infinite. I mean, space goes on forever as far as we can tell. We haven't ever seen the end of space. So it's going to be interesting to see How many people actually stop and listen? And that voice is that internal voice that's inside of us. And using words like love are probably the best word we have at this moment in 2020, because it's been a word that's been used for the last couple hundred years, but there's a lot of other words we could use moving forward. And a lot of languages we can speak. There's languages that haven't even been invented. Let's just say artificial intelligence becomes a very real thing and it learns to play an ancient game like Go, and a computer beats the top human being in the world at this ancient game and has some kind of intelligence. We don't know what it is at this moment, but what if that intelligence creates a new language for everybody to communicate? Just like DARPA out of World War II created an internet. We don't know what's going to happen moving forward. And I've been blown away from prophesizing in the 90s, working on building a browser and building a language for that browser to communicate, whether it be JavaScript or PHP or HTML, the markup language, using a browser to communicate to everyone, which is possibly what you're using right now, Jaswinder, on your computer to have a Zoom call. It might be going through the browser, I don't know. But this language that we've created is evolving, and I think that it's too big of a task for the human brain to create one language that everyone in the world can communicate in, because English is not cutting it. And I don't know if any of you guys speak any other languages, but I personally like Spanish. That's a language I'm romantically connected to. I like the sound of it. I like the Latin root of it. But the Germanic languages, the languages in the Philippines, the Tagalog and the different 6 branches of that, we'll find a language to communicate. So please use English, and go ahead, Jaswinder, I'm all ears.
In the mid-70s, early 80s, some young bright sparks came out with a language and they gave a name to it and called it Esperanto. It was a mixture of Latin, Spanish, French, English, mainly European languages, as a new language and a technical language. And they tried very hard to get everybody to take it up as a new language that we could take worldwide. People didn't want it. They wanted to stick to their own language that they were attached to. So that may be something that will evolve of itself rather than be forced onto people. I'm not going to berate that any further, because I think certain things will take a lot longer than other things. Technical languages, languages that are running in the background of machines, yeah, certainly the very young, bright people who put these machines together, they were very quick on the uptake, but it will take time. As to whether the other things will come about, if they don't, then it will take a whole lot longer. But they will come about. There has to be, otherwise we're going to be stuck in the same old cycles of destruction. I'm complete.
Yeah, I'll just share one last thing is that, and oh, go ahead. Well, let me just finish one quick thought, Sam, and then I'll cede the floor to you. Is the thinkers, the intellectuals, the artists, the people whose job it is to take reality and show a different slant on it, such as people like Carl Jung or Albert Einstein or whoever is an influencer of a global change in the language and the thinking, those artists are the ones that we've been waiting for. And I think more and more people are being pushed to that field or that direction, and to become the artist, to look at reality and change it and coin phrases like INTJ or 16 personalities, and like these type of new lines of thinking is what will change all of this globally, because it just gets adopted naturally like a meme. And with that, I'm complete. Go ahead, Sam.
Well, I just wanted to acknowledge something you said maybe 3 or 4 minutes ago as a very good expression of appreciation for the study of history. That the stringing together of civilizations and communities, without that context, we think we're just all on our own. We're doing this for the very first time. There's nothing to learn from previous people. And it's such a naive, immature perspective. And I have to admit, I was that way when I was young. I didn't care about history when I was young.
But that's the thought that was given to us at time.
Yes. Again, that the future is the only thing that's important, right? That I am the only thing that's important.
And
Forget future generations. Forget
science is the only thing we need to know. Yeah, you're right.
That ancestors are basically pure pressure from history, right? But that's a very immature perspective. But then it also led me to think, well, in order to really recognize the value of that history and what people were trying to learn and trying to pass on, to me is all the more reason why this notion of shared group memory is so important. Oral tradition was used to be the only way. And then that's why we recognize the value of, writing and printing presses and that sort of thing. If not for shared group memory, then for what, So I think it's actually, to me, again, something very puzzling that this notion of shared group memory is not better understood and better appreciated within this group. And I think that's just another opportunity to really think about the role of not just the memory, but you bring up the language. In other words, what are the constructs that go into the language that express that history? Whether it's narrative, whether it's symbol, whether it's causality, spirituality, whether it's science, all of that is necessary because you only learn if you make mistakes and learn from them. And that's why the shared group memory is so important. Not just to record what we learned, but to record what we tried. Over.
I just wanted to agree with you, Sam, and say I was listening to Noam Chomsky the other day, and he's one of those wisdom keepers. And in all ancient religions, there are the people of the tribe that are designated to be the wisdom keepers, to take a vow to pass on the history and the oral culture. So I feel like us here all talking to each other is some sort of unconscious agreement to be wisdom keepers. That's what we're doing here. And you're sharing your wisdom with me, Sam, and Jaswinder's sharing his wisdom today. And I'm taking what you guys are saying. And then when my nieces grow up and I'm talking to their kids, I'm going to pass on that wisdom that I learned today here with you and with Jaswinder. And if Heiner popped on, I would love to hear his wisdom from that Spanish G25 conference. And I think that's what's missing in the world today is the respect, the honor, and the dignity for people like a Noam Chomsky who dedicated his life to learning and keeping of wisdom and being one of the foremost linguists in the world, to have studied linguistics. I mean, what an amazing human being to still have on this planet. And he is being honored right now. I've noticed he's just did a little tour on several podcasts throughout the internet to make sure his wisdom is passed on. So if we can continue to honor the wisdom keepers of the tribes, and how we define those tribes is ambiguous at best, but there are tribes still existing on this planet that are still passing on wisdom. And that's what I find to be most disconcerting, especially in America, that the baby boomers aren't being honored as wisdom keepers. They're looked at as failed people who failed to create that beautiful radical movement of the 60s, and they got overtaken in the 80s with greed. And so they're not respected as wisdom keepers in our nation, in our tribe called America. And that to me is the failure of American society, because their parents, I believe, were respected for going through the Great Depression and going through some tumultuous times, and they were respected as wisdom keepers, but we're not respecting the baby boomers as wisdom keepers. That's just my take on the American oral tradition being passed on. I'm complete.
Yeah, I mean, there's a huge part of me that agrees with you. I think there's also recognition that there are other cultures who still today, even though it may be less than before, have this multi-generational sense of connection and with family and with culture, where the I is not necessarily worshipped as much as it is, you know, let's say in parts of the US, especially the wild frontiers for the last 200-300 years. And that there's still a sense of recognition of, what is it called? Filial piety. Is that a term that we can use here? That elders do have some wisdom that is worth passing on, and that it is a responsibility of those who are still growing up to try and learn from them rather than keep making the same mistakes. And yet we still have these trite truisms like, you know, somebody tells you something you don't really understand. You touch a hot stove, now you understand what heat means, you know? And so much of it is, how do we learn? How do we choose to learn, you know? And I don't know how we get past that. We don't have this recognition of shared wisdom, of shared valuable memory of lessons learned, and how to pick and choose, because there's a lot of bullshit as well. You know, I got to tell you, you know, there are bad mistakes that every family makes. In parts of Asia, even in my family, there's history of otherness, you know, of even racism. And it's painful to have to admit that and say, yeah, you know, those were not the things that needed to be passed on. So how we pick and choose, what is the wisdom to learn from and pass on? You can look at parts of the US and say, they're really learning the wrong things from their earlier generations. And we can all cite examples, I believe, of that. So anyway, that's the discernment that I think is very difficult for young people. And insofar as I'm trying to learn, I'll cite myself as that, to try and pick and choose from the elders. I mean, you recognize Einstein, I'll recognize Chomsky and Einstein, I'll recognize Jung, I'll recognize Lao Tzu. By the way, Lao Tzu left the kingdom because he was so frustrated at how people didn't get it.
That's my favorite. That's why I'm a Taoist. That's exactly why, Sam.
Exactly. And you know the story about the captain of the guards that was sent by the emperor to go chase him down, and you know he wouldn't come back with the captain of the guard, so he just wrote down his notes and you know just disappeared. And that's the Tao Te Ching. And that's what we got left.
Yeah, that's the story we have left, but we weren't there. We don't know what happened. Go ahead, Jaswinder. I think your mic is on or muted.
I've been there you go. 6 minutes to the deadline. This is very important. We have been chatting now for months, and some of us are into our 3rd year already. And we have been very polite and understanding and listening to the same conversations over and over again, albeit there's a little bit of a tack on it somewhere in that conversation, but we're not getting anywhere. And we're allowing others to dictate the pace and what we talk about and how we talk about these things, which is leading us, again, nowhere. So unless we up the ante, we're going to be doing this at the end of the next year as well, that's 2020. And I think that's, oi, will you not do that? Give me the bottle. So I think this is what happened at the end of the 1st year, was that we had a conflab, for want of a better word, and we decided we would up the ante. Here we are at the end of the 2nd year, and we're doing the same thing, which is bound to happen. It's kind of like the nightly thing. Did I do the right things? Did I use the right words? Did I say the right things? I hope I didn't upset anybody. And that is the crux of the matter. I think we really have to go back to the 1st year and yes, upset people. Unless they're upset, they're not learning. No pain, no gain, holds true. So I'm all willing to do that all over again. It's not that I enjoy it, which I do, but I think there's a lot of good in it as well. I'm not going to name names, but people whose memories are either lapsed or they're not using them, and they need a little nudge to remind them that these things were said and that we should build on them. We should be doing that sort of thing. Sorry about that. I've taken 3 minutes. I'm complete.
I just wonder, in some ways I agree with you, but in some ways I don't. I mean, you know, Josh has his hand up. So Josh, why don't you go and then I'll follow.
Yeah, well, I could agree or disagree, and that's a game. And I just want to bring in a completely radical way of thinking at the moment, which is I grew up playing a game called basketball, which took over my life for about 12 to 20 years. I was just obsessed with this game, wanted to play in the NBA, practiced every day, 5 to 7 to 8 to 12 hours a day, like ridiculously obsessed with this game of putting a ball through a hoop. Very, very, like literally I would stand there and jump for 2 hours just to try to be able to dunk the basketball so I could dunk it. But the reason I'm bringing up this game is if you imagine our conversations here like a game of basketball, if you will, I'm just going to use that analogy, and you have to be an intellectual athlete. So in other words, you can't just let anyone onto the court to play. There's only 10 spots available and 5 on each team. And the job of that team, if you use what we're doing here, is to speak at a given time and then pass the ball to somebody else, meaning pass the microphone to someone. And if each time you speak, you move closer to the direction of the goal, and then if you do hit on something that would be stored in the collective memory and it gets stored, that is a basket. You swish the basketball and stored in the collective memory. The agreement has been made. Next, and then you give the ball back to the other team and they get to make a premise and then pass the ball, and the defender has to go after them and say what they say, et cetera, et cetera. It's a game. And in doing so, the reason I'm bringing up this analogy is to what you were just about to say, Sam, is you disagree with Jaswinder of what we're doing here. We're allowing everybody to play the game. We're not just saying these elite intellectual athletes get to play, but everyone gets to play the game. So now there's 7, 9, 12, 13 people on the court at once, and it's chaos, and where's the ball? And it's hard to keep track of, to know what was scored in the collective memory when you're, you know, today you had a game of 2 people. It's a one-on-one basketball game, Jaswinder and Sam discussing, going around the court, and then pops in Joshua. And so my closing, because I know we're getting to the top of the hour, and if you guys got to go, it's a Saturday for me, so I'm a little more lenient today. But my closing is really studying the difference between a monologue, a dialogue, and at this moment, a trialogue. And as soon as Heiner popped in, the quadrilogue. The game is very different. Just like when you're playing basketball, if you've got 2 people, you can play one-on-one. But 3 people, you've got to play a game called horse or 21 or something different. You can't play that same game with 2 people or with 3 people as you do with 2 people, and vice versa. The ideal game of basketball is 5 people versus 5 people. Otherwise, you have to change the lines and the rules of the game. So with that, I'm complete. I just want to be aware of what we're doing. We're playing and allowing everybody to change the rules in the middle of the game half the time. So I'm complete. Go ahead, Sam.
Yeah, so if I'm going to riff on your metaphor, everybody is trying to figure out what are the rules of this game that we all want to play. And while we're discussing that, each of us is keeping score a different way. You get a half a point for this in your model. For me, that didn't score, okay? For me, I got 3 points on this. Nobody else actually saw that goal, right? So we're still trying to go through that. Yeah, so that's where I go. It's a very good metaphor. It's this metaphor that says we're all here at the town square, and you know, let's decide to kick this ball around. Well, suppose somebody else brought another ball, you know, and then somebody else brought these posts, and somebody else brought some lines, and you know, somebody else then introduces a whistle into the game. So that's what I think we're doing. So my way of responding to Jaswinder is, early on, I heard a lot of encouragement that until we get to group consensus, we can each still take from these conversations sufficient learning, sufficient value, sufficient insight, hopefully, that we can each improve the game that we ourselves are already playing. And that's what I've chosen to do. And momentarily, from time to time, I'll show you, you know, my scorecard or my piece of memory or, you know, the new thing that I thought I would create and share. And hopefully that gives other people things to think about. Not that you're going to adopt mine, you know, whole hog, but maybe you just find bits and pieces in there that you want to think about. And each person is doing that. Alex is still doing that with P2TP. Tammy's doing that with listening. Heiner's doing that with his SDGs. Colin's doing that with his maps. But I think that's why I settled into this notion that we should, not should, I look at this particular thing as a town square. Because to look at it as anything more than that sets up these huge expectations. If I look at it as a basketball court, then I'm going to be wanting to pass the ball quickly, and somebody's going to be looking someplace else and not wondering, you know, how can the ball hit them in the head? They don't even realize the ball hit them in the head. And here I'm saying, it was a perfect opportunity to make a play and you didn't do it. Because they're playing a different game, you know, or they're just listening. So that metaphor actually goes a long way, Josh. So if you stack up the town square metaphor and then introduce the game metaphor on top of that, you know, think of all the different games people want to play when they get together. And we haven't actually figured that out yet. But each of us individually is still able to move forward. And I think that's right now where we are. We're at a very first step, almost not even kindergarten step, but we're trying to get there. Over.
It seems to me that we've reverted back to let's be nice to each other. Let's not upset each other. If necessary, let's keep quiet and listen to the whole story over again so that we don't upset anybody because we've lost so many people.
Are you accusing me of reverting? I'm interrupting you, by the way. So this is
exactly.
a good point.
So we'll keep moving away from what we ought to be doing, and other people are becoming bored and they move away. They turn up and they listen for a few minutes and they go off. So the ultimate truth, they do exist. I'll give you an ultimate truth. Treat others as you would wish to be treated. That's an ultimate truth.
That's a guideline. I'm just being confrontational right now, Jaswinder.
Go ahead.
I'm treating that as a guideline and not as a truth. A truth is actually, you know, something you can test as true or false, right?
Well, if you poke me in the ribs, how many times do you think I will withstand that before I poke you back in the ribs?
Yeah, but is that a truth?
Yeah. Somebody said if somebody slaps you on the left side of the face, turn the other cheek. That is an ultimate truth of making peace. If you really want peace, be the sacrifice. But if you're not going to be the sacrifice, you're going to slap back immediately.
So this is me being not nice, okay, Jaswinder. To me, truths are not stated as recommendations. Recommendations to me are not truth. Now, you can actually say, you will get the result you want if you follow this guideline. And that might be true. Yeah. But the recommendation itself is not true or false.
Yeah.
In my mind. So there's a care we want to take in our expression.
Now, this is another one that keeps coming up. We like the information, but we don't like the way it's presented. It's not nice enough.
No, it's not because it's not nice. It's not precise.
Not precise.
Yes.
I think it's precise, but it's a little forthright is what you're saying.
No, I don't care about the forthrightness, and I'm just trying to do this to illustrate a point, by the way, is that, you know, there's a lot that we learn from communicating with each other. And sorry, Josh, I'm going to take like 1 minute here, okay? One of the things we learn in information science or in software is to understand what things you can do with what kinds of objects, okay?
Yeah.
Now, with facts or statements, you can test their truthfulness or their falsehood, right?
Yeah.
That to me has a true or false nature. But saying something that is a recommendation, like treat others as you would yourself, that's not a true or false statement. Now, you can turn it into a true or false statement by saying you will get the results you want if you do this thing. That can be a true or false statement. But the statement itself is not true or false. So what they call type errors, category errors.
The way it was presented hundreds of years ago is not relevant today. We wanted more of a general statement today.
No, it helps to understand the evolution of our understanding. It helps to understand how much richer we can get from that one statement based on everything else that we've learned. So I'm not disagreeing with you, Jaswinder. I'm just trying to say that there are differences in precision. There are differences in implication. And that again addresses the differences in language that we use.
So
I'm using...
That scenario has been played out in our conversations for the past 2 years. We keep using the same kind of information, and I'll give you another example, is the thing of love. And everybody's saying, well, you just got to have love and it will work out. Well, we've been doing it for nigh on 2,000 years or more, and it hasn't worked out. What are we going to do about it?
My question is, do you want to go towards clarity, towards understanding, towards precision, or do we want to stay vague, stay high level, stay shallow? Is there a value?
Those are the questions I'm raising. Thank you very much.
Well, I'm helping restate that question. Because to me, clarity seems to have been something that has led us towards understanding, led us towards new insights, and the abhorrence of clarity, the distancing from clarity, the distancing from precision, the distancing from deep understanding.
So when that happens, like now, are we going to allow interruption so that the actual...
Did you intentionally
caught in midair, as it were?
Yeah, I know Josh has had his fill with this.
I know, Josh, it's all yours.
I'm just listening. I'm holding space for both of you guys to communicate and get precise.
By the way, I hope you see, as I think I see, that Jaswinder and I are both leaning into this particular space in this discussion. Okay?
Oh, absolutely.
And this leaning in towards this particular point drives some people away. They cannot run fast enough from this kind of discussion. Jaswinder and I have both seen this.
Yeah, I'm a New Yorker, Sam, so this is normal conversation in New York. If you don't argue a little bit and if you don't challenge each other, you're not learning from each other. You're not actually having a conversation. You're just being a Californian.
I'll be back in half a minute.
Okay, anyway, hey, Jaswinder, if you can still hear me, I'm having brunch with both my daughters today. So I'm leaving in about 40 minutes. So I don't want to cut this off abruptly, especially since I missed the first hour or so. But I really like the conversation we've been having, the three of us. And so I think we're always hitting on some very crucial points right about the time at the top of the hour here. But anyway, my point is that in the very early days of January 2017, I think, when I said I was getting pokey, no, 2018, was precisely this point, was to, avoid this, let's just be nice, let's just smile, let's just be polite, let's really kind of dig through all of that and really get to some things where we actually could learn from each other because we do have different understandings. That to me is interesting. But if we're discomforted by that, if we're uncomfortable doing that, that prevents the leaning in. That prevents the engagement. People think of that as conflict. I don't think of that as conflict at all. I think of that as real, genuine curiosity. And that's why I think it's valuable. And I really did have to back off in early 2018 when us projecting this energy of curiosity, of pokiness that did turn people off. And you'll notice that, well, you already know who doesn't attend these meetings anymore.
Do you remember, Sam, our friend Alona would use this phrase that I thought was quite apt for stating this. She would say, okay, let me put some dirt in your honey. She would always phrase it that way. And I thought that was quite an interesting Russian way to say, okay, now let's lean in. Now let's get Russian and let's lean in a little bit.
I've actually heard her say that, but I get it. I like it. You know?
Yeah, she said it many times in our conversation. Someone would be talking about love, 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 and she would say, let me put some dirt in your honey.
Well,
She'd preface it with that before.
Precipitation in our conversations, they just drag on and on and on. And some of the speakers speak so much, they've forgotten where they started, is totally divorced to where they want to be going. And then they're just staring into the abyss and just talking on the automatically stored off-the-shelf conversation, you know. And then they have the audacity to say, we're not machines, we're sentient beings. And they have no idea what the heck a sentient being is. It's really annoying at times, you know. You can wipe that mark off your face, Sam. It's really, really...
You're just...
I can't say that to the people because they get really...
You're just encouraging me, just
very good, you know.
Which is why, by the way, and that's why on Saturdays, we've agreed to have more focus. We've agreed to share things. We've agreed to write things down. We've agreed to have a roadmap. We're not doing a good job of all of that yet, but you know, we've agreed to do these things, okay? So we will still have to take tiny little steps towards doing that better. Yeah, Josh.
I'm just going to go back to my metaphor of basketball and just share with you guys the history of Joseph Naismith, I believe, or Naisbitt. I don't know how to say his name. The guy who invented basketball.
We say Naismith over the pond there. Naismith.
Yeah, I happened to grow up in Goshen, Massachusetts, which was just a hop, skip, and a jump about 30 miles away from Springfield, Massachusetts, which is the place where he invented the game of basketball. And that's where the Basketball Hall of Fame is. So that was my mecca to visit that place. And what was interesting about him inventing that game is he invented it to keep the athletes that were playing the older sports, the older games, in shape during the wintertime, when you couldn't go to the field and play soccer or play football, etc. These games that weren't able to be played during the wintertime, like baseball. So it was a conditioning game to keep the body in shape during the time when you couldn't play the other sport. So I think that's what, with that metaphor, that's what we're doing here, is we're conditioning ourselves for other games that other people want to play. I'm sure Heiner's got his game he wants to play. Harry's got his, etc., and so forth. So that's one thing that I think compassion comes into play here, is we have to be compassionate for people coming here using this as an exercise to play a different game that we might not all want to play together come the springtime. And the other wisdom I think is important is to know the seasons. In every tradition, every culture I've ever, you know, from the Bible, etc., knowing what season you're in, a time to reap, a time to sow. In astrology, in astronomy, in everything, it's all permeated and predicated on the season and your geographical location on Earth of how things are going to play out. Because if we're, you know, I noticed that from moving from Massachusetts to Southern California, the entire communication structure and culture was completely different, predicated on they don't have snow, they don't have seasons, they have a rainy season and a sunny season. And that life change was tremendous. It took me 6 to 7 years to be able to assimilate into a culture that doesn't have to deal with winter, spring, summer, and fall. So knowing the season of the conversation, I think, is important. What season are we in? Are we in the winter season, the summer season, etc., and so forth? So I think awareness of who's conditioning their soul, their love skills, their intellectual prowess for getting to the truth, whether it be logic and science, if that, then this, or if you're Doug, who's wanting to lean into interpersonal skills and emotional blockages, etc., and so forth. It's all an exercise. And like you said, Sam, to help you get precise, I came here, and I've said it before, but I'll say it again. Alona is the person that invited me here because I asked her the question, how many people are awake and aware and spiritually connected to a deeper part of themselves, to where they can do some real change for the world? People that are completely awake and open, both, you know, from their heart, their brain, and their gut. How many people are aware and completely awake on this planet? And she said, well, I don't know, but there's a few people talking here, and one is Jaswinder. So go ahead, Jaswinder. That's how I got here.
Up until you connect with your own light, the divine light, you're not totally awake. And that takes a lot of practice. And I've been trying to work people up to just starting the practice of doing that sort of thing. But there's just no response. The majority of the people are all fine talking about the little things, and they have no idea how fast and how quickly the mind-brain combination can work when that connection happens. I'm complete.
Well, I just want to say thank you to you guys, because I came here to learn. And that was my main thing, to learn from people that are much wiser than I am. And I also realized that I do have a responsibility to share to other people that want to hear, if they believe I have something that I can give and help them to become wiser than they are. So that's what I see this group and the Global Challenges collaboration is, just to learn from each other group. And if I can help someone learn something, I'm trying to be more precise. I never wanted to be a teacher. I went into teaching at the university and I hated it. I hated these people pretending that they wanted to learn, but really they just wanted a grade so they could make money. And I told them all to fuck off. And they said, you know, you can't give everyone an F. And I said, yeah, I can. I'm the professor. Fuck you. And I left the university because I gave the people that deserved it, you know, a C and I think I gave out a couple Bs, but I didn't give any A's. And the rest of the class I failed, and they kicked me out of the university because I was honest. I said, these people did not do the prerequisites. They did not come to the class as they were supposed to. And they tried to walk through it and sweet talk me into giving them a good grade, and I gave them F's. And the university said, if you fail more than 50% of the class, you can't continue to be a professor here because you're not doing your job. And I told them they can fuck off too. And that's who I am. And I'm not here on this planet to teach people that don't want to learn. And I'm not here to learn from people who don't want to teach. And with that, I'm complete.
I'm complete. Oh, one thing, Josh. It's not the gut that controls the brain. It's the brain that controls the gut. The gut feeling is linked to the feeling that we generate when we have slightest amount of fear. Are you going, Sam? He's gone. So, forward from what you said some time ago, in the last 3 months, I've reduced my food intake to the amount now where I'm down to a very small lunch, lots of fluids during the day, not a large meal, but a normal supper, and to bed. So I know exactly what's going in, what's coming out, what time it went in, what time it's come out, and how it's affecting feelings. And all that is a feedback, it's a loop. But there is no sort of, how shall I put this? There's no thinking power there. It's just a mood control. When I'm hungry, it's much easier to control that mood than when I have, especially when the large colon is full and in need of evacuating, it generates different moods. And immediately the colon is evacuated, I feel a lot lighter.
Mm-hmm.
And that is the fight or flight mood. In that mood, most mammals would evacuate their bowels anyway. It makes lighter, it makes the body lighter and running much easier, because the breathing is much easier and there's no pressure just under the, in us there's a diaphragm, there's no pressure under there, it's evacuated. That's tremendous. I'm really grateful to you for pointing that out, and I have learned something now with practical application as well.
That's beautiful.
It's not something that you said or I said, although that has a bearing. It's something that I'm going back many years that I had read about, and that we should eat as little as is required for our day-to-day purposes at meal times, you know, the next few hours and no more. But we tend to overdo it. I'll tell you what I'll show you what I mean by overdo it. Look at that. Can you see that? So I've had
a little bit.
I'll see if I can do it that way. I don't want it to fall. That's two large slices of cake. I've already had a large amount of food because of the party. And then this cake is waiting. And in there, in the kitchen, we've got 2 ovens cooking pizzas. Everybody's going to be overstuffed except me, because I won't do it anymore, as I've now realized how much effect the gut has on the mood, on the feelings of the person.
Yep. Yeah, I went deep into this study, Jaswinder, and it's amazing how many nutrients from the food are being put into different parts of your body, into cells and into the system that is the digestive system. So how your body processes the nutrients and the caloric intake and the amount of vitamins and minerals is that process is fascinating. I have a lot of friends that are, you know, medicine doctors and holistic health practitioners and functional medicine people and nutritionalists, and you could study that for your whole life. I listen to talks of people that have studied it for their whole life, and they're just as confused as when they started. They're still learning because of
there is no confusion in my mind. I've been looking and listening to people about diets, and the writing of the very old people still holds true today. And the other thing I would like to point out to you is that the amount of food we eat has a direct relationship with the amount of sleep we require. If I have a light meal and go to bed, if I have a light meal at about 8, 9 p.m., 2 hours later I go to bed. A light meal, I'll wake up much earlier than with a heavy meal. So if the meal is fatty, same amount, but it's fatty or sugar laden, then it takes longer to process. A light meal, let's say potatoes, peas, and vegetables and things, and that will be processed in 4 or 5 hours, and I'll be awake. And then I've got nothing to do, because the mind-brain combination is like, well, we've done that bit, and all the thinking that needed processing, we've done that as well. What's next? that is a superb thing to understand in the relationship with what we do and what we eat and sleep. And science is nowhere near cracking that yet. And that was cracked thousands of years ago.
Yeah, that's from my understanding of history, the Ayurvedic understanding of food permeated all of Asia and got baked into the traditions of cooking in the Asian cultures.
Yep.
So if you look at the spices from India, because that's where a lot of the spices originated or cultivated for many years in the Indus Valley, that translated through the Thai cooking, the Cambodian, the Malaysian, the Japanese,
Yep.
etc., and so forth. So yeah, I agree. I the more I read Ayurvedic medicine, the more even the teachings of the Buddha, I thought were pretty precise and well thought out, and have transformed many tribes, many nation states for thousands of years. And when I first learned of the Buddha's teachings, I didn't understand why everyone wasn't practicing the Eightfold Path and the Four Noble Truths. It just seemed pretty accurate at the time when I was 26. Now that I'm 46, I understand why everyone's not practicing it. But at the time, I was dumbfounded. I was like, this is so right on. Like, we could solve all conflicts in the world if we just followed the Eightfold Path.
There's no profit in that. And we are what we believe. So if you've been led to believe that drinking alcohol and sitting down on some cushions and stuffing yourself with food and looking at a nubile young lady dancing, and that is enjoyment, that's what you have stored. That is the recurring thought that when you do your day's work, well, what shall I do now? Oh, I know, I'll go and have some enjoyment. And that's what the whole world is stuck in. Alcohol, food, and nubile young things, with some clothing missing, dancing. And that needs to change, obviously. We're overdoing it. Well, it's coming up to past. I think we've had a good session.
Agreed.
We'll have to see what happens tomorrow.
Well, remember what the Buddha said, Jaswinder: laziness is an obstacle to the path.
If you overeat, you will be lazy. If you drink alcohol, you will be lazy. If you dilly and dally too much with women, you will be lazy. If you combine all three, you will be extremely lazy.
And it depends on what your path is. I think everyone gets to decide what their path is. So that's the beauty of being human, is that we get a chance to put things in our mouth. I mean, not many people are force-fed. So usually we get a chance to lift the chopsticks to our mouth or the fork and spoon. So we get to decide.
Everybody is force-fed. Everybody has these marketing people forcing you by giving you ideas about, well, you've got to have this much to eat. That's the normal amount. And then you've got to have this much sleep. Otherwise, you're not getting enough sleep. And then there's somebody in a little voice somewhere saying, no, you could eat only half of that and sleep half of the sleep you're sleeping, and you will be twice the person you are now.
Yeah, and the Buddha talked about that. And one of the things that he said is there are people that step off of that influence of the day-to-day life and become
Now you're agreeing
monks.
with me. Thank you.
Yeah.
Who's host currently?
Well, I hope you have a little bite of the pizza, at least one bite, just to join in the laziness of others, so that we're not separating. That's why I'm not a Buddhist, is because I was so separated from other people being a Buddhist. I didn't feel like I belonged in the tribe, and that's why I chose not to be a Buddhist anymore and be a Taoist, because not being a part of the tribe was more painful and suffering than actually partaking in some of the tribe's practices that I knew was not the path. And that was me recognizing the nature of the surroundings that I was in, which is why I'm at this moment in time, not practicing the Buddhist path, but maybe later I will. Who knows?
Okay.
So may we all find our own peace and our own end to our own suffering.
No such thing as
distract.
peace, and there's no such thing as suffering. These are concepts that have been given to us, and we need to change these concepts.
I agree, and I think we all need to figure that out for ourselves.
With a little help.
Hopefully. Well, thank you for your help today. It's good to see you, and I'm happy to hear when I got on the conversation that there's a new life in your family, and congratulations for that.
Thank you. See you tomorrow.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye. And meeting for all.